Thank you very much for waiting, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to begin ISAP 2020 Thematic Track 6, Redesigning Local for Transformative Change, Demonstration of Circulating and Ecological Sphere, or CES. My name is Kataoka. I have an honor to serve as a moderator. I'm Joint Program Director of City Task Force of IGES. So this session is going to focus on circulating ecological sphere that was advocated in the 5th Basic Plan on Environment of Japan. We have a lot of speakers joining us, including the mayor of the city of Sado. You're looking at this YouTube streaming. And we have Slido, which is a software which can accept your questions and comments. You can refer to this QR code, access this. If you have any comments or questions, please submit those through this software Slido. Due to the time limitation, we may not be able to address all of the questions. I hope you understand. So, as we have only limited time, we would like to have the first program, which is dialogue. Today's dialogue is entitled Towards the Establishment of a Sustainable Society in Harmony with Nature, a Key for Redesign of Our Society in the Post-COVID Era. We have this dialogue together with Mr. Watanabe Ryugo, Mayor of Sado, and Professor Takeuchi Kazuhiko, President of Institute for Global Environment Strategies, or IGES. And the moderator is Ms. Nakajima Eri, Director of Office of Global Environment and Decarbonizing Innovative Research, Global Environment Bureau of the Ministry of the Environment, Japan. Good afternoon. My name is Nakajima. Very nice to meet you all. This coronavirus has brought a lot of impact on our lives. How are we going to respond to this corona pandemic? We have to turn this crisis into opportunity to bring about the transformation, to change our society and economy. In order to promote the transformation, we have this concept, which is circulating an ecological sphere, which was advocated in the 5th Basic Plan on Environment. And at IGES, we have a variety of researches and supports that are being provided in order to promote this idea of CES. So using nature and also renewable energies which are available in a local area, we have integrated approach to solve a variety of issues in that region. That is also to address a variety of SDGs at the same time. So in this dialogue, we have the Mayor Watanabe from the Sado City, which is having an advanced approach to create the local area based on the living in harmony with the nature and also co-symbiosis. And with and post-corona, we'll be discussing how to have integrated approach to address all of the aspects such as environment, economy, and society. So Mr. Takeuchi is going to give us the presentation first.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I'd like to show you my slide, but we want to make a sustainable society which is in harmony with nature. I believe that is the biggest issue that we have. And when we think about that, the premises must be understood. First of all, why is it that we have something like the coronavirus, which is an infectious disease that is common among humans and as well as animals? We see this happening quite frequently. One reason may be the deforestation. Another reason may be urbanization, and that is bringing the world of the wildlife and world of humans closer together. And also we see rapid globalization, and therefore infectious diseases will spread very rapidly throughout the world. I believe that is another characteristic of the modern world. And the reasons of these things are not just creating infectious diseases, but it's also accelerating biodiversity loss, climate change, disasters as well. So we need to look at all these things together when we think about countermeasures. And right now there are a lot of discussions about, for example, SDGs. We have the Paris Agreement. And on biodiversity, we have a long-term target. And also we have the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. Unfortunately, all of these things were discussed separately. We need to bring them together, integrate them, and also at the same time, on the local level, we need to have action, implementation. And then we need to create social changes because of the pandemic right now. And I believe we are really faced with the question of how to do that. Now, at IGES, we have this concept of triple R framework, the three R's, to look at the current situation. Looking at the current situation, for example, the response, for example, in the medical world against COVID-19, a little bit more looking at the future, how do we want to see social recovery? And then looking at a faraway future and recreating society, which should be brought about by redesign. We have to think about these three R's. And one point is, from the time of response, we need to think about redesign. We don't want to wait until later to think about the longer term. We have to think about them in parallel. Now, one example is natural disaster. The Minister of Environment, Koizumi, talked about adaptive recovery at an international conference. So this is about adapting as we recover. In the United States, President-elect Biden talked about building back better. That was his slogan. But I think this is quite similar in thinking with that. Now, the fifth basic environment plan, there are two major characteristics. One is SDGs have been integrated into the plan, and the other thing is in order to implement SDGs, we have this concept of RCES, the regional circulating and ecological sphere. And this has a hierarchy. Think about rare metals. It's not something that circulates in one small community. It circulates in the world. And agricultural waste, for example, that should be circulated in a small locality. So looking at the resources and thinking about what is the most optimal scale that they should be recycled. And based on that thinking, what kind of structure should we have? So first, we have to live in harmony with nature, which means we have to look at natural disasters and we have to adapt to the new disasters that we face. And then we have to look at resource circulation. And on top of that, we need to think about decarbonization. So all these things have to be integrated in our local community plan. But we don't want to have a closed community. That is not the aim. We want to have mobility among people. We want to have information being exchanged. We also want to advance technology for a globalized world. So it means all the treaties, SDGs, agreements, the goals and targets in SDGs, we can see this link between and among these goals and targets. And if we take a different perspective, especially on the local scale, we may have been purchasing a lot of things from overseas, and then we will send out a lot of things overseas. That's part of the problem of globalization. So maybe we want to consume locally what is produced locally, but also have a link and connection with the global world. That is the kind of local community that we want to have. Now, in Sado, I think I did one good thing there. GIAS, the globally important agricultural heritage systems. I actually helped in establishing this. It's been about 10 years since I've been involved. So GIAS, what is this about? This is about looking at traditional agriculture in the local area, but then trying to make that more sustainable so that it matches the modern world. I thought that this was a very important concept for Sado City. Mr. Watanabe back then was one of the top officials, and he took me around Sado for a tour, but I'm hoping that he will continue on this path. And as we continue this, it will mean that added value will create this local community. I believe that this would lead to the pride of the local residents. It will give them a meaning of working and living. And so now I'd like to ask Mr. Watanabe about what is actually being done on the ground. Thank you very much, Professor Takeuchi. You talked about what is in the background of COVID-19, about the destruction of nature, globalization, and there may be hints of how to resolve this with the concept of CES. Yes. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Watanabe about what is being done in Sado.
Thank you very much. I'm the mayor of Sado City. Thank you very much for this opportunity. This is a picture of Crested Ibis. Our initiative started from our initiative on the Crested Ibis. It is not exaggeration that our endeavor started with this initiative. Sado is an island city. It is located at the center of Japanese archipelago, and the Crested Ibis, which is about 1 meter wide when the wings are spread, went naturally extinct at one point, and we tried to rehabilitate the population, and we would like to share with you about the journey we have taken to date. Bringing back the Crested Ibis into the natural environment was in 2008. Biotop creation or the conservation and rehabilitation of river have been pursued. However, because that was an agriculture-based civil engineering, it really didn't spread in terms of the geographical scope. In looking into the Crested Ibis in the wilderness, we have come to a conclusion that they usually feed on shallower waters. In order for the Crested Ibis to have a population of about 200, we have to create a feeding ground for this bird. And how should we create such a feeding ground for this species? So we came to a conclusion that the initiative should not be predicated on the protection, but rather to be a more proactive endeavor. Because their legs are not as long, they need to find a shallow water feeding ground. And rice paddies is an ideal feeding ground for this species. And how should we be able to do that? We decided to reduce the use of chemical input in agricultural practices across the island. An initial target was 50% cut on fertilizers in rice paddies on Sado Island. And that, I think, was one of the factors contributed to the rehabilitation of the population of the Crested Ibis. And coexistence was the concept that was highlighted. And CBD also focused on the concept of coexistence. And that was how we
came to an understanding that we are on the right track, and that was back in 2008. And back then, we thought that the rehabilitation effort of the Crested Ibis should be embedded in the entire agricultural policy in Sado City. This meant that each and every pieces of rice paddies to be managed in ways that can be friendlier to wildlife. Left top is what we call it, or the deeper irrigation area. Before 2007, rice paddies did not have a deeper area, and 60 to 70% of the rice cultivation period were not watered in the pot, but we thought that the water should be kept within the pot rice paddy throughout the year to make it possible for the Crested Ibis to feed. And this kind of initiatives were embedded within the entire agricultural policies, which was then certified by Sado City. This also has contributed to a bigger sales of rice production on Sado City, because that has contributed to the stronger brand building. And despite the pandemic, our rice industry is thriving in Sado as well. We currently have a population of the Crested Ibis of about 500 in the wilderness. So when you go to work, you can see the school of Crested Ibis, and you can't get to see them because it is darker when you're coming home. But on a lucky day, you can see a pack of about 20 or 30 birds flying in the sky. I remember that these birds were flying over Dr. Takeuchi when he was visiting Sado. So over a short span of 12 years, we have been able to rehabilitate the population in the wilderness, which I thought was nearly a miracle. And this was made possible by all the stakeholders, including the farmers on this island. Now, GIAHS has been touched upon by Professor Takeuchi, and thanks to this nomination, our attitude towards farming have positively changed. Thanks to the agricultural community, we have been able to preserve much of the traditional culture in Sado as well, including the non-theatrical performances. So across the agricultural or agrarian society have been preserved thanks to the nomination of the globally important agricultural heritage systems prize. Having said that, we still have some issues. Red is the area where we are seeing the aging of the society, and into 30 years fast forward, you can see that the populated area will necessarily have to shrink, and most of the farming families are having difficulties finding the next generation to continue the farming practices. Against this backdrop, we are planning to become as a forerunner in finding solutions. At the bottom, key is the well-being and coexisting with nature. Not only the thriving economy, but the richness of life for the people who lives in the community. We have to make relevant proposals and initiatives. And this is the visual conceptualization of what I've been saying. And SDGs are situated at the very center of our initiatives. And we are having a localized version of SDGs unique to Sado region so that we can pursue achieving these goals with the Sado initiative. Thank you very much. So coexisting with nature and the SDG Future Cities as a next goal for Sado City have been covered. I have a question. So how has Sado been impacted by the COVID-19?
So roughly speaking, there are three things: remote work or workation, and also migration and settlement. And these are new movements we are seeing. From the economy perspective, the economy is not being sustainable, and we may face a situation whereby employment may be lost. And yet another one is a lot of festivals have been cancelled. Children and other people work together, practice for the festival from 1 month before, which means that local communities are getting lost. Once these are lost, if it's within 1 year, they can be restored. But after 1 year, they are not restorable any longer, which means that tradition and culture cannot be passed on to the next generations. So that's also a problem. Another one is the rice consumption has declined. And if you can't produce enough rice, you can't use rice paddies. And that can lead to loss of biodiversity. And everything else like landscape can be lost as well. So I think there is some kind of overall impact of coronavirus. Thank you. So workation can be an opportunity out of this COVID-19, but there are also challenges going ahead. So from Professor Takeuchi's perspective, how do you think this crisis of coronavirus can be turned into opportunity in Sado? Well, once again, when we have such a problem, I think we made realize that there are certain things that are missing from SDGs. That is the element of culture. And this is about interconnection between people and interaction among people or having meals together, what can be nurtured by such interaction of the people. So how can we promote that or restore that in a safe manner under this COVID-19 situation? This is an infectious disease which will affect us in the future as well, almost for sure. And people's health and also safety, our society may not have been sufficient in terms of responding to the health of the people. That's why we need to have good coordination. And this is about a hybrid or combination between online and real. This is something we need to have as a perspective. And it's the same for GS. GS is not saying that we have to protect everything from the past. GS is talking about adaptation to the modern society and how to make use of traditional practices of the people in the past to adapt to the modern society. That is a very important perspective of GS when we think about the creation of society. And against this backdrop, I think it's very important to take on the challenge of creating a new culture to make Sado even more attractive. And this in turn will benefit the economy of the island and the creation of a better society.
So the culture that we have, by the combination of real world as well as the virtual world, maybe this crisis is forcing us to think about how we do that. And also workation, that may be a new opportunity. And Professor Takeuchi has also talked about that. So it's not just about workation, but working from home is becoming possible. So you might move to a rural area, maybe take part in growing rice while you also work in the office from home. So looking at the current issues, maybe we can also try to promote creating the circulating ecological sphere in Sado. Mr. Watanabe? Well, yes, in terms of energy, we are looking at the use of, for example, solar panels, and we have a model eco house and also biodiversity. Now that we have wild crested ibis in the wild, but people who are involved are really active. But if you look at the whole island, uh, we must try to recreate nature on the island as a whole, which means that each individual has a specific role to play. It may be difficult to understand, but the SDG goals, we are creating the subtle version of SDGs so that people can understand what they can do, how they can take part in achieving the SDGs goals. And by having many people take part, I believe we can motivate people to be very active. So we want to put SDGs at the core of recreating our community. So SDGs, it's very difficult to understand how it fits into your own life, but in Sado, you are creating a Sado version of SDGs. I believe that is really great. Now, RCES is being created in Sado, but that's not it. As Professor Takeuchi said, you said that you need to have exchange of ideas among different people, different stakeholders, and I understand IGES is involved in many different regions. And I believe IGES will support the efforts in Sado, but what will you be doing? Well, Sado, first of all, has to live in harmony with nature. I believe that would be the starting point for all other efforts, including decarbonization. I believe you should start from there. And the point of RSES is not doing different activities separately. You have to integrate the whole. And I believe that is most important. And for that, I believe the silos that you have in the city office should be reviewed. And when you think about that, I believe in the case of Sado, yes, there may be big issues ahead, challenges, but that is, for example, how do you maintain the forests? Or it may be difficult to look at forest as an asset. Maybe you should look at cattle as well as biomass and look at how you can maintain the Satoyama. And in a more comprehensive way, yeah, you have to think about how you manage the island to make sure that it's not just the rice paddies that are flourishing, but you have to make sure that the mountains and the forests are also flourishing. Well, I'm hoping that Mr. Watanabe can stay as mayor for at least 3 terms. I'm not really sure how many years you have been working as mayor, but probably working for a long time will actually lead to coexistence with nature, and I expect great things coming out of Sado.
So the key word is integration, and Sado should be the model for the entire nation when it comes to the harmonious coexistence with the nature. So going forward, would you like to leave any messages to the audience who are looking forward for them to take on an initiative? Localization is very important in driving initiative, and you have to distinguish the local needs and requirements. And as has been touched upon by Professor Takeuchi, Satoyama Initiative and also the rice paddy driven natural resource conservation should be rolled out. And I look forward to receiving advice and consultation with IGES as well going forward. RSS should not be considered as a material concept, but rather it is more like a soft aspect such as people-to-people contact or social systems. So it is rather a soft power that is needed in terms of the RSS. So different stakeholders needs to work together. Agrarian land had been governed by farmers, and the forest has been governed by the forest keepers in the past, but different stakeholders needs to work together depending on the unique characteristics as well as the needs of each locality. And I think that will be a positive factor. Thank you very much for your input. Today's discussions have shed light on the issues on the COVID-19 as well, and all these challenges can also be taken as an opportunity for the local community to move into a more positive directions on the part of Ministry of the Environment. We look forward to working with IGES, replicating such successful cases across the world. Thank you very much for your input today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nagashima and Mr. Watanabe and Professor Takeuchi. It was a very significant discussion, and Mayor Watanabe needs to excuse himself due to other engagements. Thank you for your participation, Mr. Watanabe. CES, about that, we have received a lot of messages through this dialogue. CES is not a closed system. This can be practiced by anyone, and we need to connect the people. And that way, we will be able to have overall improvement. And also an aspect of culture which is not necessarily covered by SDGs, according to Professor Takeuchi. And in the case of SADO, they are really addressing all of these aspects of culture, economy, as well as people. Now we are going to move on to the second part of this session, which is demonstration of CES cases from Japan. We will have presentations from Yokohama City and Kumamoto Prefecture. And Mr. Sekiguchi is going to talk about Yokohama's case, which will also encompass the aspect of culture, I believe. So the next presenter is Mr. Sekiguchi Masayuki, Manager of Co-Governance and Creation Division of Policy Bureau of City of Yokohama. The floor is yours, Mr. Sekiguchi. For the first time in Japan, decarbonization SDGs idea was advocated as CES, and the city of Yokohama resonated with this vision very much. We have the population of 3.75 million people, and we wanted to practice CES in Yokohama as well through a variety of measures. And today I would like to explain to you why is it that we wanted to implement CES in the city of Yokohama. And for that purpose, what kind of a vision and a mechanism and policies and projects are going to be deployed? I would like to touch upon these topics. So first, towards sustainable future, what kind of challenges do we face in the city of Yokohama? I would like to talk about 3 points. Yokohama is a big city, but we are seeing rapid aging and a decline of the population. And in 2025, we will see more than 1 million people aged over 65. And another challenge is because we are close to Tokyo, Tokyo's culture and economy have almost swallowed Yokohama, especially in the 21st century. those people in the 30s and 40s, they are moving from Yokohama to Tokyo, and this is accelerating the rapid aging. And number three is, and this is not just about Yokohama, but this is a common issue across urban areas across the world, which is we are seeing more frequent and more intense natural disasters. And as Professor Takeuchi said, because of the globalization of economy, we have a situation more prone to infectious diseases. And so we are seeing more frequent natural disasters and more intense natural disasters in the past several years. And in order to address these issues, we have these three directions. One is to establish our own society and economy. And another one is to work together with a variety of private sector actors through open innovation. And I would like to talk about Circular Economy Plus, which is a kind of Yokohama version of CES, which is my main topic today. So Circular Economy Plus, we have four areas: local for local, health promotion, parallel career, and sustainable development. And even if we are a big city, we would like to have local production, local consumption of energy and also food. And even in the big city of Yokohama, we have a lot of furrowed, vacant lands. We would like to make use of them so that we'll be able to use available resources to create a sustainable area. And the parallel career, this is about another way of learning, not just in schools or in companies. We'd like to have flexible ways of working and learning for everyone in Yokohama. And also healthcare, nursing, sport, and life services, and etc. They were all silos, but we would like to have an overall promotion to eventually achieve well-being, which is the ultimate form of happiness for everyone. So these are the 4 points, and in order to achieve that vision, what kind of mechanisms are available in Yokohama? One thing is this is to accept proposals from the private sector actors and then make a coordination. For that, we have co-creation front. This is open around the clock. And those proposals submitted through this function, we have a co-creation lab and a living lab, which will be explained later on. These are the mechanisms of having dialogue. And then through those dialogues, these proposals will be turned into projects which will be more sustainable, which is a local good Yokohama, which is an ICT platform. So this local good Yokohama, we didn't spend public money at all. We worked together with the private sector to use this open data. And we visualize the challenges that exist in the city of Yokohama and produce data. And through the dialogues with the citizens, we create projects out of those proposals. Through crowdfunding, we raise money. And everything can be done on the private sector basis to address these challenges. So together with such a local good, we have collaboration with the private sectors, and through dialogue and demonstration, we are trying to come up with solutions to address the local challenges. That is Living Lab. And at the center of that, that's local businesses. They are there. And they are the ones who are deploying a Circular Economy Plus. So across the city, we have a variety of initiatives that are going on of Living Lab. And we have some examples of Living Lab. A platform of the public and private sectors has been established. Young people are taking part together with the companies as well as the university researchers. We are trying to come up with new projects against the backdrop of this coronavirus. For instance, EU grass that can be used as compost. And what could not be cultivated in Yokohama, that's olives, can now be cultivated. And then sports centers and hospitals are working together, connecting shopping areas and the residential areas to create the all of Saturn healthcare project. And also working together with restaurants for locally produced, locally consumption food. We are trying to reduce food loss. And also we are trying to create a system to watch over those people who are in need. And local production, local consumption of energy to create more resilient town. We are trying to come up with decentralized, distributed evacuation centers. So all of these things are being experimented. And it's not just limited to the city. We are working together with Yuzawa City of Akita Prefecture in order to make this kind of a system available in other cities to create CES elsewhere. So with this opportunity, I am hoping to work together with other cities across Japan based on the concept, which is the common concept of circular and ecological sphere. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sekiguchi-san. So culture, network, and connection with people and expanding such network, these are the key words which were mentioned during the dialogue as well. And you are already practicing these keywords and concepts. So I think you have really concrete endeavor for CES. And the city is creating places for the private sector to come together to approach these issues.
Now moving on to Kumamoto Prefecture. We have Ms. Yanabe Taeko, Assistant Manager at the Environment Division of Kumamoto Prefecture Office. So we will have Ms. Yanabe make a presentation. Thank you very much. I would like to talk about Kumamoto's challenge towards zero carbon in 2050. I have 4 items that I would like to explain about. If I can please show my slides. If you can go 2 pages further. First, looking at global warming status in Kumamoto. This looks at the average temperature of Kumamoto and the trend. In the past 100 years, the average temperature has increased by 1.83 degrees Celsius. And if we don't take any measures against global warming, the average, as well as daytime highs and average overnight lows, but at the end of the 20th century will rise by 4 degrees Celsius at the end of the 21st century. And because of that, last year in December, our governor has declared that we will aim for zero carbon by 2050. And under his leadership, 18 municipalities also made a similar declaration. So all the prefectural citizens were able to share in this target, and therefore we now were able to gain the momentum to implement our plans, and we have started to make those plans this year. But that's when, in July, the linear rain band was formed over the southern part of our prefecture. And in just one night, our first-class river Kumagawa flooded, and the cities around it were inundated in muddy water. And actually, the meteorological agency said that this was caused by climate change, which is caused by global warming, which means that we need to take action right away. So first of all, we had to make sure where we are now and what will happen in the future. And therefore, we looked at the facts and evidences, and by August, we analyzed the current situation. This looks at the GHG emission within Kumamoto. It peaked in 2013, and then after that, it has been declining. And if we look at the emission by sector, industry, transport, households, business, these 4 sectors accounted for 90% of the GHG gas emissions. Looking at the breakdown in nationwide, we can see that in Kumamoto, the four sectors share evenly. However, actually, households have become number 3, and it exceeded the emission from transportation. And if we look at the breakdown of the emissions in industry, 44.3% came from electricity, while in business division, electricity accounted for 85.8%. And in household, electricity accounted for 78.8%. And in transport, the situation was a bit different. But for the all other 3 sectors, electricity was the main reason for GHG emissions. And this now looks at the Ghg Future Trends. So if we continue with the measures that we have in place now, we can see that there is a decline in GHG emissions. And also, if we take up CO2 emissions alone, we can see a similar trend. Under our current plan, the reduction targets have been set, but in industry, business, and households have already achieved the targets. And that's because these sectors are reliant on electricity, especially for household. We see that energy consumption itself is going up, but the emission factor for electricity is going down, and that's why we see that the targets have been achieved. But when we think about actions to be taken by 2050, we should consider this emission factor magic. So that's the situation in Kumamoto. So by 2050, if we want to reach carbon zero, what are the challenges that we see? So once again, looking at the current situation, 2017, that's when the GHG emissions peaked, but rather 2013 was the peak, and in 2017 we see a 17% decline, and that's mainly because of the emission factor decrease. Actually, the energy conservation has not really progressed that much. So a business as usual case, if you look at the future, saving in energy does not progress that much. In our prefecture, we are using the emission factor that is provided by the power company. So the ups and downs in GHG emission is actually affected by the ups and downs in this emission factor. So we are reminded that this July, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry has said that thermal power plants with bad efficiencies will be closed gradually. So in Kumamoto, because we are so reliant on electricity, this may be a tailwind. However, relying on other factors means that we are doing nothing. Therefore, it means that we need to understand the characteristics of the prefecture and come up with our own measures. So now we are considering what actions we should take. So far, the CO2 reduction plans will be reviewed drastically, and we will look at carbon in order to measure the effects of the actions that we take. And this is a big challenge. This is about restructuring our prefecture, and we need to consider 4 points. Number 1, climate change and natural disasters. We have experienced that. Therefore, we have to show the prefecture that carbon zero is for a better living in the prefecture. Secondly, especially in household, we have reached the limit of energy saving, which means that we need to look at social demand and work together with adaptation plans. Thirdly, in our prefecture, we have an urban area as well as mountains and also the sea, and 40% of the population is centered in Kumamoto City. We have 10 municipalities with population less than 5,000. So we have to look at the whole prefecture as well as have measures that are custom-made for each area. Fourth, we have gone through the great earthquake in Kumamoto. We have also suffered the heavy rains under COVID-19. And we need to take measures, which means this is financially tough. So we want to make sure that we tie up with the business world, make sure that our measures would lead to economic growth, and we will look at recovery from the natural disasters as we redesign the whole prefecture. That is all from myself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. So you have mainly talked about measures against global warming, but at the end you said that you are also looking at natural disasters as well as the energy shift. You are looking at the environment, economy, the society altogether comprehensively, and that is needed for your prefecture. And the prefecture is leading in this effort and are working with the municipalities in the prefecture. I believe that those were the important points. So Kumamoto, yes, you were hit by the earthquake as well as heavy rains. I do understand that the situation may be tough, but we hope that you do achieve an adaptive recovery. There seems to be a lot of questions coming in, but we'd like to move on to the next one.
Sekiguchi-san and Nam-san, thank you very much. Next, we would like to move on to the next segment of application of CES framework in other countries. IGES has been working with START joint research project. Partner will be speaking on this occasion. First, Executive Director of START International, Dr. John Pajot, and Assistant Professor of Department of Architecture and Urban Planning, Visvesvaraya National Institute of Technology, India, Dr. Samir Deshkar, and also Dr. Vijit Busaba and Marom, Head of Taramat University, Research Unit in Urban Futures and Policy, Thailand. Also, Dr. Bhajan Kumar Mehta, Senior Water Resource Specialist, Natural Resources and Ecosystem Service Groups, IGES. So 4 doctors who will be taking the podium in this sequence, starting off with Dr. Pajam for his presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm honored to be here. It was interesting to hear the examples from Japan, particularly the example of the Crested Ibis. I think we're all living through a very difficult period right now in 2020. So when we hear about success stories of how nature can be restored through this kind of an approach, it's very inspirational. What I'm going to be talking about is RCES in the context of the START IGES collaboration, looking at rapidly growing city regions in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And within that context, looking at the RCES concept in terms of urban, peri-urban, and rural connectivity. So it's urban and rural, but thinking about the peri-urban region as well. And one of the key aspects to think about is the city region or sort of territorial approach to thinking about sustainability. And one of the aspects is the strongly interconnected nature of flows of food and remittances, natural resources, raw materials, finished products, labor, information, and so forth between and among urban, peri-urban, rural areas. That's one important consideration that we're thinking about. Another related to connectivity is the extent to which risk exposure is spatially linked. And we're finding that more and more under a changing climate, that as we try to adapt to climate change, for example, with more intense flooding, it becomes critically important to look at the surrounding areas around cities and how do you preserve areas of wetlands, forests, agricultural land, agricultural land, so it can remain viable as a way of mitigating flooding events. But when you think about that, one of the important aspects is not only preservation of the urban areas, but what are the incentives within rural and peri-urban areas to preserve natural areas of wetlands and forests and so forth in order to get that kind of flood flood mitigation, for example. And so thinking about the impact on the urban areas, but in turn, the incentives for peri-urban and rural areas is very important. Another aspect related to this connectivity issue and ecosystem services, of course, is climate mitigation and greenhouse gas reductions and increasing carbon sinks through more natural areas surrounding cities, as well as thinking about a more localized economy and fewer carbon miles and so forth. The RCS concept also contains critical equity issues, and I think this has come up, and particularly in the context of COVID-19, there are important trade-offs and synergies in terms of economic viability, rural areas relative to urban areas, issues around empowerment, thinking about gender and youth and ethnicity, and some of these other issues are critically important, and how COVID-19 has exposed some of these fault lines around social issues. And then think about ecosystem, ecosystem services in terms of the cultural dimensions. And this came up in the earlier presentation, that sort of environment and culture dimension that's critically important. As we move forward, we're bringing all these dimensions into how we're thinking about this. And in developing this effort in South Asia and Southeast Asia, of course, we're expanding our partnerships to include Thammasat University with Dr. Ann Vijayabhusaba, as well as Visvesvaraya Institute of Technology in Nagpur with Dr. Samir Deshkar. And we've been working with them to really help us think more critically about the RCS concept in the context of Southeast and South Asia. And they're working with us to further develop the concept, but then also to initiate a regional consultation. And of course, this will be a virtual one because of COVID-19, and that will begin in January of this coming year. And we're framing the consultation in terms of the local context, the local needs and priorities, which can then inform larger priorities for research, knowledge sharing, and capacity development. And lastly, just thinking about the issue of capacity development a bit more, because that's what START does, is we're a capacity development organization. Some of the key principles that inform our effort is a need to focus on local needs and priorities, and to develop the capacity building strategies around local needs and priorities. Strengthening capacities for integrating knowledge and different worldviews. What Professor Takeuchi talked about in terms of soft power, soft aspects, learning how to work more closely together. And one of the ways of doing that is thinking about transdisciplinarity, the co-design of research, doing community science and so forth. And lastly, promoting experiential learning that helps to gain skills and confidence to carry out the work. And so, as I said, we're still in the very early stages of this. We've had some really good consultations with our partners in Bangkok and Nagpur to help us think through this more. And early next year, we'll begin the full-on city consultations to develop the platform. And we'll be doing that remotely in the coming year, with the idea that late next year, hopefully early the following year, we can begin to do some more in-person type of activities. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pajam. In Southeast Asia, as well as in the South Asia, there are some projects going on. Thank you very much for touching upon those. Now, we would like to hear from our research partners from India as well as from Thailand. First, Dr. Samir. He's from Nagpur. He is already implementing RCES. We have a joint project. So what is the situation of implementing RCES in India? Dr. Samir, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kadaoka-san, for introducing. And I also thank the organizers for giving this second opportunity, because in ISAP 2019 also, we were there when the mayor of Nagpur city also had joined for the ISAP last year. And we had discussed the formulation of this RCES strategy for the city of Nagpur. And I'll be today very briefly sharing what we have been doing, how we proceeded with the concept of RCES. Now, before this starting of the RCES, we were already considering the linkages between the urban and the rural area, which are very interdependent for various sectors, including the natural resources and the human resources and financial resources. But what we also realize that we need to build on this relationship to generate a resilient developments in these areas. And with that background, we all entered into this RCES, which happened to emerge as a very best approach, which addresses this concern of interrelationship between the urban and the rural area. For a reason that it touches upon almost all the sectors and all the aspects that we were looking at developing this interrelationship between urban and rural areas. So when we took up this, we identified to begin with, because we had to have a demonstratable kind of a model to evolve. And we had to define the region first before we take up, because the extent at which we take up this concept will also determine the complexities that we have to deal with. For us, there were limitations of the time and limitations of the resources. So we tried to define this region around the main resource, environmental resource that we have in this region, that is a river. And water is a very prime kind of a consideration that we have in the central India, which registers extremes of climatic conditions. We have summers reaching up to 49 degrees and winters reaching up to 4 degrees. I mean, there's an extreme variation in the climatic patterns we have, and the rainfall also is quite very high, which is 1200 millimeter on an average. So this region, water becomes a very important parameter, and therefore we focus on the river corridor and selected the settlements. As you can see from here, that's the box, the corridor that we selected. And the settlements that fall under this corridor, they belong to forest area. They were very rural areas, peri-urban areas, and the urban area. This is how we categorize different settlements to carry out this RCES approach. And each of these settlement area have a very unique dependence on the water and the natural resources. And they have the proximity to the city also have created some kind of pattern of resource use. This is what we try to understand. So we analyze these area under their physical profile, meaning the terrain, topography, and other developments that you have, then the land use and land cover. And we analyze the change also that has been happening, how the process of urbanization has been extensively determining the land use and land cover change. Even in the recent analysis, we have come to know that water sharing mechanism between the rural and the urban area is also quite heavily determined by these urbanization forces. So urban area, the city receives more water, which basically is coming originally from the rural area. But the rural area, then they have a development deficit created because all the water that they have is diverted to the city. So this again gives us a very sound kind of or a very perfect situation why the RCs should be explored, so that both the areas, they meet their requirements and without compromising the developmental concerns that you have. After carrying this analysis, what we did was we brought all the stakeholders, including the government officials, the experts, because most of the time the local decision making is guided by very different concerns, and the scientific approaches are guided by different principles. And many times we talk about bridging this gap between the decision making and the academia or the scientific findings. So in order to galvanize this momentum for the RCES, we brought in all the stakeholders, including the experts, public representative, community-based organizations, and we also invited people from the villages, which basically share this water resource with the city. And it was a very unique experience because it was for the first time that the voices of the village community was heard on this platform. So the RCES, as that was being rightly pointed out in the previous presentation, that we need to have this cultural continuity and the connection between different communities, which was very much, witnessed during that the workshop that we conducted, because voice of the locals, the village community, was for the first time maybe heard by the city populations also. And then at the end of this workshop, we came out with different partnerships, which can be worked out at different scales, spatial scales as well as the sectoral scales. So you can see in this diagram, the corridor that we worked out, there were, the forest rural areas, they showed different partnership potentials. The rural areas, they showed a different partnership potentials, which will require different stakeholders actually to be brought into pictures, right? So the more was when we talked of a holistic partnership between the forest, rural, peri-urban, and the urban, that you have the majority of institutions which can get involved, and all the stakeholders, they can play a very vital role in building this RCES concept in the region. So the key takeaways from the workshop was that we need to look at strengthening these urban-rural partnerships or the linkages, which can go into applying this RCES concept. That's very important. We need to tap onto those linkages. Then we also need to institutionalize these partnerships for the RCES, because for sustainable perspective of these initiatives of RCES, institutionalization becomes very, very important. What we realize as local people are taking actions at the local level, they are doing the resource conservation, but without any support, without any kind of a funding or any knowledge or technological support. They're doing it on their own because that's their need at the local level. So if you can institutionalize this, then it becomes easy to channelize the efforts, channelize the efforts and basically carry out in a much longer way. So that was the experience from Nagpur, and I'm very glad to share that we have a forum now, which is established at the municipal corporation, and we are furthering this concept with the support of IGS. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The RCES concept has been accepted by the mayor then, and we are advancing our research while based on this concept. We understand that there is now an organization that is connecting the local communities, and I just will also continue to verify and also move on with the project. Now we'd like to move on to An from Thailand. How is RCES being adapted in Thailand? I'm hoping that we can hear from your experiences.
Okay. Can you see my screen? Sorry.
Yes, we can see.
Okay. Good morning. I think it's gone. I think my screen's gone. Sorry. Can you see it, please?
So let us try to share from our side. So yes, you can continue
yes,
talking.
Please. Okay. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. I am really appreciative of being here. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm relatively new here, but we've been working with START since 2011, and most of our experience is based on water and land use management. And we've been working with large cities like Bangkok and fast-growing city or secondary cities like cities in Udon Thani. So there are two things I would like to share with you. I think it's maybe worthwhile giving you a little bit of context of Thai city challenges to becoming resident cities. And also I think there's a lot of opportunities for our CES approaches to be adopted in Thailand context. The first challenges is about, we are facing with multiple hazards in different urban areas. There's a lot of problem about flooding in economic center in urban areas, but during the dry season, we face drought in a wider urban areas or rural areas. Because cities often got prioritization in terms of water allocation, especially during the dry season. So this raises a concern about environmental justices between urban and peri-urban or rural areas. And second challenges, I think, is about city cannot just only coping up with environmental change, but also socio-economic changes as well. There's still a lot of people, migrate to urban center, also internal changes like social structure changes, changing in demands, like we are reaching super age society soon. Also, fast urbanization in urban, peri-urban areas. So these changes in faster rate than environmental changes. And the third challenges is about land governance challenges. To manage a land policy, we have to face with horizontal and vertical challenges. Most of the ecosystem services belong to regional and national authorities, but to manage land use and to manage, city itself, it's the responsibility of local government units. So when you work across the different local area, then you are facing with different authority as well. And the fourth challenges is about water resource management. It's still very mainly focused on draining water or increasing drainage capacity. And the solution is very much still very engineering approach to flood mitigations. So as a result, most of the policy transfer the risks from one area to another area rather than managing risks as a whole or risk management. And the fifth challenges is about implementing the small-scale urban catchment. We try to propose this, but it's still very challenging because it's not very profitable as comparing to selling lands to develop to real estate or something like that. And the last challenges is very much focused on policy. We tend to predict and act in a short-term manner, and we have one set of standard and apply to many types of cities in Thailand. So it doesn't take in consideration of internal and external challenges or changes like I mentioned. So the last point I would like to make is about opportunities for our CES approach. I think there are three key main important opportunities. The first one is very much about integrative action and framework, to create a new sustainable society. This also linking the long-term benefit and also to provide, an immediate or the basic need benefit like housing, efficient infrastructure to the local residences. And this, I think, it can be done through the land governance issues to linking environmental and social issues together, and also to maximize sustainable use of regional resources to overcome environmental injustice, like I mentioned before. And the second opportunity, I think we have to plan based on different scenarios, and the solution shouldn't be just one size fits all or the one best solution policy. We should have a range of robust policy to cope up with different changes. And the last thing I think is the most important thing, RCS approach, I believe that it can create a policy for local action with social acceptance. I think the best policy is about how much people can accept the solution, and that is a challenge for academic like us to translate knowledge into action through different kind of partnerships. So I think these are my thoughts and based on our experience to work with Thai CDs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. An. So this integrated approach will become possible, and the land governance. So it's not just land, but you are having a more overarching approach, and through that, our Ces could be applied in Thailand.
Next, our fellow researcher at IGES would like to make some initiatives being taken by IGES by Dr. Bijan Kumar-Mitra. We're a bit behind time, so.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. From today's discussion, we understand that the regional CS approach would be a very useful concept that will help us to address the sustainability challenges that we are facing right now. And to advance this approach, what IGS is doing, I would like to share those activities with you within a few minutes. So since the fifth basic environmental plan of Japan adopted by the cabinet, IGS has started to working to promote this concept in the international area. We has been taking several approach. One approach is to disseminate this concept in the various international forum. In 2018, in the STS forum, Professor Takeuchi introduced this concept with the wider audiences. And also in 2019, in 6th Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, their IGS proposal on circulating an ecological economy that was launched in that event. And also IGS initiated the research work with support of the internal resources, including financial and the research expert. We initiated a research project in Bangladesh and India, and as Dr. Shomir just shared that some of the results of our activities in Nagpur. And recently, we signed an MOU with STAR to promote this concept in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And also, we are going to sign another MOU with Asia Pacific Network for Global Change Research to promote this concept in outside of Japan. Now, this is our approach to advance the concept in Asia region. The first step we would like to take, that is the formulate a platform on regional CES in South Asia and Southeast Asia region that will help us to work together to generate the knowledge and also transfer the knowledge. And we will also work together to develop the capacity of the local stakeholders as well as the young researcher. And in the process, we closely work with the local stakeholders. Now, what we are doing, if you see that IGS and START collaboration, we are working to collaborate, working to elaborate the concept through the mapping of the challenges in the Asia and the Pacific regions. And we would like to organize the regional workshop in South Asia and Southeast Asia. We have another collaboration with APN. Under that APN collaboration, we will organize the national level workshop. And also we are conducting case study in the local level to generate the evidence-based knowledge that will help the stakeholders in the local level to decide the appropriate approach to solve the problems. Now, this is the mapping of our activities in the South Asia region. So you will see we have different activities in the regions already. We are going to organize regional workshop in Bangkok and in Nagpur, India. And we also have national level workshop in different countries. And we also conduct case study in the different cities, including India, Bangladesh, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and of course in Japan. And this is our approach actually, that through the regional platform, we will go to the local level and conduct the evidence-based research work and generate the knowledge to support the local stakeholders to formulate the regional CS framework. And this is the outreach and the impact generation. If you see in the last year also, we organized one session where the Nagpur mayor also attended in that session. And after that event, she sent, Honorable Mayor sent a request letter to IGS to collaborate with the Nagpur City Corporation, that we are closely collaborating with them. And we also have a stakeholder workshop to disseminate this concept to the local stakeholders. And if you see that we are also, this concept also incorporated in the urban planning syllabus in the VNIT, so that this concept will be used to develop the capacity of the young researcher. And these are the publications, several publications we already published. And we are going to have a book publication. Professor Takeuchi is one of the editor of this book. And this will actually focus on this concept and the application of this concept in different geopolitical area. This is all about my presentation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mitra. I would have liked to hear from more overseas researchers and research partners, but due to my poor moderation, we are running out of time. I would like to ask Dr. Pacham to give us some very brief comment, just to represent the entire group.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased that we're a part of this initiative and that there's already been some work underway in Nagpur that we can build on and learn from. I think Dr. Vijayabhusaba did a good job of presenting what are some of the larger issues, framing what we need to do and the need to really both Samir and they brought to the foreground some of the issues of really engaging local communities and what does that mean and what does that look like and how do you build the trust and sense of shared purpose so that this thing can truly succeed. It's a long road. It's not just a single project intervention. It's building on things that have already happened, and it's really understanding the incentives and the power structures as well that underlie a lot of these issues. And so understanding those governance issues is critically important for us as we move forward. And I'm very pleased to have this partnership with IGES and to bring in our colleagues from Bangkok and Nagpur. And we look forward to a very rich effort over the next year and years beyond that to make this move forward. It's a very exciting concept. I like the notion of soft approaches and being very flexible and innovative in how we do that. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, John and Ann-san, Samir-san, everyone else. Thank you very much. So we would like to have other opportunity in the future to discuss with you. Now I would like to invite Mr. Sasaki to give us a presentation. This session ends at 2 p.m., but I would like to ask you to allow me to extend a little bit So, Mr. Sasaki, Director of Office for Policy Planning and Coordination from the Ministry of the Environment, please. I am Sasaki from the Ministry of the Environment. I would like to talk about RCES and its deployment here in Japan and what we do. So I'm sure you are familiar with this concept already. So at the Ministry of the Environment, we call this local SDGs. In order to practice and implement local SDGs, we have this scheme called CES. So in order to create self-reliant and decentralized societies, as we listen in many presentations, what we focus particularly on at the Ministry of the Environment is look back on when we lost sustainability. This was probably because of the energy revolution. We started to depend on fossil fuels. That's where we started to lose sustainability. So we would like to now move away from the underground fossil fuel and utilize the resources on the ground, such as energy and food, such ecological services. They are actually distributed across the country. We would like to fully tap into these resources, and for that, each region and local area of Japan needs to be self-reliant and make full use of the resources available in each area. And for that, people need to be able to continue to live in a sustainable manner, and techniques and knowledge will be passed on to the generations to create or maintain self-reliant and decentralized societies. And at the very foundation of that, we have decarbonization, circular economy, and also living in harmony with nature. So these are very important principles based upon which we create such sustainable societies. So this is to explain the process of creating CES. As Professor Takeuchi said, it's all about creation of social systems and connection among people. In creating CES, we focus on these aspects. In Japan, there are certain areas which are really implementing CES already. When I observe these areas, they are creating such CES over 10 years or 20 years. But at the beginning, it's just several people who want to make that area better or revitalize that area. This is where things got ignited. And these people share those challenges with many other stakeholders and talk about dreams and visions for the future. And that way, connection and a network among people gets created. And then the vision is now created, and towards that vision, what should be done? What kind of businesses and projects need to be established? So that is the next consideration. And the creation of a project, this means the creation of mechanisms of the society. And through such mechanisms, we create a transformation to have a more sustainable society. And if such businesses and projects are born out of that area in a continuous way, that is already CES. There are certain characteristics of the approach of CES. There are certain approaches that are different from the past. For instance, value creation is one, and to find value in what was considered not valuable. Maniwa city of Okayama Prefecture, they are talking about a particular rice called Sato Umi rice. And this Maniwa city is in the mountainous area. They have rice paddies to produce rice. But then in the downstream, there is the inland seas of Japan, and they have aquaculture of the oysters. And those oyster shells, they are discarded, but now they can be used for the rice paddy to create a better fertilizing land for the production of rice. So they are creating this kind of a circulating society in this entirety of the river basin. And what was in the past discarded is now utilized. This is a creation of value. And in order to have integrated way of solving problems, we have to use renewable energies. And around that, the money can be spent for welfare. And where there is lack of employment, the foundation can be started in order to fund certain new projects and other businesses. So this is a kind of integrated approach to solve problems, not just addressing one problem, but several problems at the same time. And that is a very important part of our approach. Sorry, next slide, please. Yes, you can skip it. So at the ministry, all in all, across Japan, we are supporting 32 areas. There are different types of areas. Renewable energies at the core in some, and resource circulation or recycling maybe at the core in some other areas. And also Sado, they are using a very important wildlife resource to create such CES. At the Ministry of the Environment, in each area, we create a regional platform or a local platform. And then on this platform, they create a vision, and then they do stock taking of challenges and create network of people. So in order to operate such local platform, we need to have financial support and also some expert knowledge and advices and also support overall. And such a support is being supplied by our branch offices of the Ministry of the Environment. And we also have NPOs that are to assist such projects. And we also have budget from other ministries and agencies that can be used, not in a sectionalism, in order to address those problems. And also we have ESG financial approach, and those businesses in urban areas can provide solutions and technologies to address those local challenges. So matching is also being done. So these are all of the ways for the Ministry of the Environment to support those local areas for CES. Thank you very much, Mr. Sasaki. He has explained to us how the Ministry of the Environment is supporting those local areas to create our CES.
So finally, from Professor Takeuchi, we'd like to have one final remark to wrap up this session. Well, thank you very much. 2018, we came up with this concept of regional circulating and ecological sphere. We made this proposal in the basic plan on the environment for Japan. And as you've seen in the map presented by Mr. Sasaki, we now see that it is being implemented nationwide. And also, as we heard in the previous session, in India and in Thailand also, we see implementations taking place in Asia. So I'm very happy to see this. I am hoping that we have these dots in many places. Now we want to link them together and also to see linkages between these cities, municipalities that are trying to implement RSS. So integration, this concept of integration, integrating the environmental issue, don't just focus on environment. You have below that the people who are supporting these efforts, and also you have to look across the environment. And also, each region has their own characteristic. You have many diverse people living in the local community. So that diversity also has to be considered in the implementation. And I'm thinking that this should not be something that is forced on certain regions, that you should do this or you should do that. It has to come out from each local community. And we hope that you make efforts to make that happen. But we've already seen a lot happening on the ground, and as one person involved in coming up with the concept, I'm really encouraged and really happy. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Takeuchi. Under your leadership, we are working together here in Japan and also abroad, trying to spread this concept of our Ces. So thank you very much. I'm very sorry for overrunning the time, but with this, we'd like to end this session. Thank you very much for your cooperation.